thinking about death and dying, and I'm a parish minister, but I'm also a territorial Navy chaplain, and so chaplain to the forces, and we thought it might be worth thinking about what that means and what insights the military might have for all of this. I guess one of them is that traumatic death is now increasingly common, so the chaplains out on tour, particularly, well, now it's just Afghanistan, but prior to that Iraq, we're dealing with you know, probably an average of a fatality a week, and sometimes multiple fatalities, and sometimes those occurring in a place where there wasn't very much in the way of facilities, and how they deal with that in a very close-knit community where the guys have still got to get on with the job straight away. We had a presentation from one of the chaplains who'd just come back from Afghanistan, speaking about the mistakes that he made, that he felt, and reflecting on that process. And one of the things that he discussed was the immediacy of it, and that he thought that it was a good thing for the comrades who'd been out on patrol to be able to see the body of their comrade, and he decided with hindsight that that was just far too raw an emotion, that there was the body still laying in the sort of the table of the field hospital, still with, you know, medical interventions a part of it, and he just felt that that was just far too raw. And he said the anger in the room was just so palpable that it felt as though it was totally beyond his ability to cope with. The thing that he spoke about very clearly was how there were different stages for different people, that the body initially was right in the front line, in maybe a forward operating base and a patrol base, where it might be for a couple of days until a helicopter or transport would arrive and take it on to the next stage, and that might be an intermediate post, but probably back to what in Afghanistan, you know, Camp Bastion, the big logistics hub where everything happens from. And so that the people in Bastion would see lots of, you know, helicopters coming in with bodies, and the medical staff there who wouldn't have been able to do anything about that, but still needing to come to terms with the fact that these young men were passing through their care. And for the camp as a whole, again, there maybe wasn't that personal connection anymore. Maybe none of the people in Bastion knew this man, but they developed, you know, ceremonies for receiving the helicopters in, and when the body particularly was taken finally from the hospital, from the mortuary, put onto the back of a plane and flown to Britain, and that they developed a ceremony around that of walking through the camp, and then whoever was available, and you know, guys would be working all sorts of hours and shifts, but those who are able would come out and line the route as the body was taken from the mortuary and put onto the back of a plane that would then be flown back to Britain. But then going on to the back of the plane, that the flights didn't actually leave when the body goes on, because the flights only leave in the hours of darkness, but this would take place in the day. And so there's this sort of staging and theatre that would go on, where the plane would sort of taxi out of sight, but would then actually park up and wait, and it would only leave for the flight when night fell. And so that there were these sort of three stages of a very immediate and raw grief with the immediate comrades, where there would be some kind of hasty ceremony and a chance perhaps for his platoon or his section to be able to stand around and take a little bit of time in close proximity to the body, and for that to be, you know, very raw and not very scripted, and then as it sort of progresses to become ever more choreographed and almost more of a military parade aspect about it, as then pallbearers would, you know, carry the coffin, and that would be, you know, drill movements, and that would be rehearsed. And then when it arrives in the UK, obviously it arrives to RAF Lyneham and the village of Wootton Bassett, which is one of the staging posts through which all of the vehicles come, has developed its own ritual around that, where quite organically it seems that people know when a flight is coming in, and they line the streets now in silence, and it's almost become a national part of that mourning process, that people will come from further afield to line the streets of Wootton Bassett and to welcome home the bodies of the soldiers. And so shopkeepers would close their shops and the traffic would come to a standstill and the cortege would move through, you know, this probably very picturesque little village in the Cotswolds, you know, very twee part of the English countryside, and yet become this very real focus where either folks who knew them, but often folks who didn't, but people who just are aware that this is where there's a chance for them to pay their respects. I suppose what's curious there is that it's very much a village has become the focus for sort of a nation's, well, a part of the nation, the part of the nation that cares, the part of the nation that does think this is significant. It's provided that geographical space where people can come, and I think that's very significant. I suppose it's allowing stages where different groups are able to do what they can for the person who's died, and so if that's very immediate in a forward operating base, there's something, but there's also recognition that that doesn't hold up the sort of tempo of operations. You know, guys who are out one day and watch a comrade get blown to pieces, the next day will be back out on patrol on that same ground. They've not got the chance to mourn, and in a way for them their mourning has to sort of be deferred, so that when they return from the tour, then perhaps they might, you know, visit the parents of, you know, their comrade who's died, or visit the graveside. Some of them might get taken to be pallbearers at Camp Bastion, but it's very unlikely that they will get to leave Afghanistan to come back to Britain to be alongside the kind of final resting place. And so I suppose it means that at each of those stages it's a way that an ever-increasing community gets its chance to, I suppose, come to terms with things itself, and perhaps to offer comfort to the families. I mean, I think it is a comfort to families of those service personnel, you know, killed, when the nation does say, well, we acknowledge your loss, we acknowledge your grief, and if that's them, you know, coming to be alongside as the body is repatriated through RAF Lyneham, through Wootton Bassett. I suppose the danger is that it might cease to be a very personal thing, that it might become something that is a show that people feel that they're just a very small part of. And I suppose that's a real careful balance as to how do you let the family have their personal time, their personal goodbyes, alongside this sort of public and ceremonial and national occasion. I guess that public thing is important, and maybe it's more important as people feel less and less connected to individuals. I mean, in the community here, you know, maybe that kind of bridge of trying to do something similar, that when people die in a community, to try and slow things down a little, to try and allow there to be some element of public recognition